You'll see it. I'm not alone in the studio today. Joining us is a 2023 Delta Scholar. It's Jack Thomas Spears. He's a Delta native, but he's currently studying at Mississippi College, and he's up to some good things. So welcome, Jack.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And congratulations for being a Delta Scholar. I think that's a big thing and a big accomplishment. For those of us who may not understand what that means or entails, how do you describe to someone what a Delta Scholar is?
Yes, ma'am. So a Delta Scholar is a program that Mississippi State University has implemented through the use of funding and then also their Shackles Honors College. And their whole goal is to kind of bring a positive difference in Mississippi and the broader multi-state Delta region. So as a Delta Scholar, you spend 2 weeks during the summer in what they call like there's a Delta Week and then a Mississippi State Week. So the Delta Week was a 7-day kind of peruse and tour of the Mississippi Delta. So we spent time mostly in Clarksdale and Cleveland, Mississippi, and then we traveled to places like Mount Bayou. We even went up to Helena, Arkansas, and talked with community leaders and nonprofits and people working and doing work in the area to kind of give us a feel and it was a large immersive experience, especially for the students who had never been to the Delta.
I was supposed to say, with you growing up in Greenville, then was it kind of like going home, or Jack, did you get an opportunity to maybe see parts of the Delta you had never seen? Because I know some say once you see one part of the Delta, you may have seen it all, but that's not necessarily true either.
Yes, ma'am. So it did feel like going home. And kind of getting back to all the flatness and all the cotton plants and all the soybeans and the rows and rows and rows that you drive past. It was a comforting sight for me. While I could kind of see it in other students, it was kind of eerie for them to see all the flatness, especially students from Northeast coast that had never experienced that before.
What do you, or did they ask you a question? Number one, did the students who went with you, Jack, did they know that your roots were tied to Greenville? Or did you have to sort of explain, hey, this is kind of Delta culture, or this is what's sort of normal here? Or did you sort of just let them experience it and then you sit back and kind of watch? Because any of that would have been fine.
Yes, ma'am. I'd say a little bit of both. So there were a handful of students, I'd say 5 of us, that were from Mississippi and had Mississippi backgrounds. There's a guy from DeSoto County and then another from Madison, actually. And so we had a little bit more background than the students, from Michigan or Tennessee, places like that, haven't been in such close proximity to the Delta. And so we did get to explain some things, like that's a cotton plant. And a lot of people had never even seen what a field of cotton looked like before. And it was back in June, and so the bolls weren't going yet. They were just green plants, but they were just amazed to see what that looked like for the first time.
Do the students who go on that 7-day tour of the Mississippi Delta, do they come in with preconceived ideas of what their project's going to be? Because as a Delta Scholar, you ultimately craft a project that you're going to do for your studies. Or do you kind of get inspired while you're touring in sort of like what you want to do?
Yes, ma'am. Also, a little bit of both. So before the program actually starts, we have a few virtual meetings where we're kind of tasked with kind of getting a feel of what we would like to do. Now, of course, our teachers and mentors give us the advice that we could come in with this full idea, this fully fleshed out plan, lots of work, and then that all kind of get deteriorated by nonprofits saying, well, that's not really what we need. That's not really in our goals or our aspirations, or that wouldn't be a tool for us that we could use. So they do advise us to kind of have some simple ideas, kind of like with our passions, like what we would want to do. So for my project, that's what I started to look at, is like my passions and kind of how that could kind of play into it. And then once we got to the Delta, we had a good amount of time to speak with the leaders and ask them, what do you need? Like what would help you? And then the 7 days in the Delta culminated at the Delta Regional Forum. And so that was a forum that consists of nonprofits, of community leaders, and then also community foundations, such as the Community Foundation of Northwest Mississippi, when we kind of all came together and they spoke about different projects or things that are going on, news and events that they've held. Nonprofits got to speak on like what they stand for and their voice and what their aspirations are for the next year, and kind of like the needs that they need. And that's when our Delta Week ended, and we headed to Mississippi State University for the next 7 days, which is where we kind of got to sit down with professors. We got to sit down with policy leaders and lawmakers as well to kind of get a different side of the immersive experience that we just, were inhabited with.
Because you'd have to think, and working a lot in nonprofit long before radio career, and seeing the Mississippi Delta, even a little bit into what your project is about, which we'll get into, Jack. Everyone thinks it could be so easy. There has to be an easy solution. We can just fix the Delta with X, Y, and Z, and it's a little more complicated than that. And you have to get in there, and you have to get to know the community. You have to get to understand, the people and sort of the culture. I'm curious, Jack, what passions did you bring into the week that you went, knowing that you wanted to hopefully pair X, Y, and Z with something you found there?
Yes, ma'am. So my passions, one, I would say a great deal of passion of mine is being an outdoorsman. So I love wildlife. I love the wildlife of the Delta. I would frequently tell my other students that I was with there, I would tell them how much time I'd spent the last fall in the Delta, duck hunting and deer hunting and all of these things where I get to be in the beautiful nature that the Delta holds and the biodiversity, that the area is just such a special place. And a lot of, one guy, he was the land manager for the Alcorn State University farm that they have near Mount Bayou. He was telling us that, there's no other place in the world like the Delta.
No, I definitely think everyone listening to Good Things would agree with that. But it also has its challenges, right? Mm-hmm. And so there is this idea or this opportunity there for creative solutions. And I think it's neat that, they're offering these opportunities for students to come in with fresh ideas, with real passion, and maybe see where their ideas can sort of fit in. When did you start to whittle down what you thought that you could be of service for, Jack, as you sort of expand your experience as a Delta Scholar?
Yes, ma'am. So I knew that I wanted to focus on food insecurity. My grandparents actually immigrated to Greenville. There's a big history of my grandparents are Chinese, and they immigrated from Hong Kong, actually. There's a big history in the early 1970s of a Chinese population moving to the Mississippi Delta and opening up small stores, the corner stores, the liquor stores, the candy stores, the little corner markets with groceries and things such of that nature. And so they ran that corner store from the early 70s into the late 90s, and they closed it down. And then as a child, I would hear stories of, our grocery store. My mom would tell me things about helping the community and having groceries that people could come in and buy, and then traveling to see aunts and uncles in the area and kind of their stores and hearing their stories. I really got to start to build, as a young person, I got to build this perspective of how important groceries are for the area and how important these small locally owned stores are for the area. And so then now, as I've matured and grown and thought about this a lot, how important those small markets were for the community, and then seeing how all of them have left now has made such a big impact, because you have all of these locally owned stores that were holding up this community. Once they all leave, your big stores such as Kroger and Walmart and others aren't going to want to move to the area. They don't see any use of it, which is a big one of the the adding factors of the problem of food insecurity. So I knew I wanted to chase after food insecurity, and I really wasn't sure how I was going to do that until what I noticed during the forum is these the presenters especially would bring up lots of facts and data. You'd see lots of statistics, you'd see lots of bar graphs, you'd see lots of line graphs. You'd hear over and over again that Mississippi, is first in the hungriest, and we're last in help in the Delta, and you'd hear all these numbers and things. And something I really started noticing is you didn't see faces, you didn't hear voices, and you didn't see people behind those numbers. And so then through that, I have a love for photography and videography as well. That's kind of just sprouted within the last couple of years, and that I've done a few things with. And so then I kind of connected those two dots, the food insecurity and the photography and videography, to then bring that to my project and how it is today.
I think that should be in just about every boring report that we have to read about Mississippi, or really anything when we think of statistics, because we look at numbers, but each number or percentage point represents a person, represents a family, represents, something a little bit more important than just a number. So photographs are a perfect way to do that. Well, it sounds like you definitely have found your niche, Jack, and we're going to have more into his Delta Scholar project coming Channel 70. I give give you permission to look at the Weather Channel. You'll be a little bit happier, at least for this week here in Mississippi. I was just telling our guest who's joining us, Jack Spears, he's a Delta Scholar. He is from the Delta, but he's studying there at Mississippi College, that this weather has been a nice change over the last couple of days. Tomorrow should be like 88, and I feel like I should put on my Uggs and wear
and a winter coat.
But I'm super excited about it. But I'm also excited about what the Delta Scholars are doing, and then obviously your project. So your project is entitled what? What's the title of your project?
Yes, ma'am. So my project is right now, and it may change.
Yes, because it's in the beginning stages.
It is. Yeah. It's titled A Deserted Delta, a photographic journey through the Mississippi Delta food deserts.
Which you were sharing what food deserts are, and I told you I've said the statistic before. It may have changed over the last decade of me working in this area, but the average Mississippian lived 27 miles from a grocery store. And you may think, oh gosh, I've got, now the Dollar Generals or the whatever popping up everywhere. And that is part of why they are popping up everywhere, is because your smaller mom and pops left. But I would argue, as I would assume your family, Jack, that's not the same. When you had locally owned small grocery stores embedded in a community who knew its neighbors better than a chain's going to know it, they were able to care for their neighbors differently. Would your parents and family members who had small businesses feel the same?
Yes, ma'am. I would agree with that statement. And I think that they would agree with it as well. And just hearing my grandmother, talk about the different stories that she had within the store and then outside of the store as well, and just how much they cared for the Delta. Like I remember one thing that she loved to do was to give turkeys to her garbage men that came by around Thanksgiving and Christmas, and just like that, neighbor help neighbor type coexistence of everybody helping everybody to make it, to have the Delta as it was 10 to 15 years ago.
Well, and two, you get to know who your customers are, and you get to sort of sense maybe they're on hard times and they don't want to speak up, and you can kind of lend a hand or be observant. Not that those who find themselves employed with some of these other chains that are popping up everywhere don't have that kind of mentality, but they don't always, because that's really not their, sort of, it's just not the same. Let's just put it that way and that way. So you're using photos as your medium to sort of bridge this gap. I love that you shared, Jack, that you want to turn the statistics that we hear about the Delta into photos, right? So we can sort of see behind them. So how are you going to do that? Like, how, I know it's in the beginning stages, but
Yes,
what's sort of your plan to help share the Delta story through photos?
Yes, ma'am. So my plan right now is I'm going to connect with food pantries who are actually doing the work within the Delta to help people that really struggle with food insecurity. So the overall goal of the project is to advocate for food insecurity work that's being done within the Mississippi Delta by expanding a viewer's awareness of the current work through photography. And so what that's going to actually look like in method is I'm going to connect with a few different counties. So right now I'm going to try to start with 5, and then as I, progress and find different things in different outlets and am advised by mentors and also other people working in the field, I'm going to try to cover all 18 deltas within the region. However, I'm going to start with 5 and just kind of try to really make good connections with the people working there. And because what I'm wanting to show, again, as you see all these statistics and you see the bad, you see the negative, you see that we're the hungriest, we're the poorest, we're the most obese, we have the least amount of nutrition. And I just want to show the flip side of that there are people that are doing the work, that there are people handing out food to the hungry kids, that there are people that are giving the food, that there's a whole network, the Mississippi Food Network being one, that is in place to feed people that are really struggling with this. And so again, to give that photo, as they say, a photo speaks 1,000 words, to give that to a viewer in order to therefore hopefully, garner more funds, more resources, more availability, even volunteers for the food pantry work that's going on in the Delta.
If even more anything else, more awareness and more empathy, I think, can be used in sort of this area. Because if you don't understand food insecurity or you've never been in that scenario, you can come quick to have a lot of preconceived ideas. But really, food insecurity is just for someone who may not be able to make ends meet, not all the time. So you have hunger, where it's like you don't have any food. Food insecurity is when the rains came came. Y'all remember when it rained so much
Yes,
we
ma'am.
wanted it to stop? Remember those times, guys? And then people like construction and labor work weren't able to get out and sort of work, and so people find themselves on hard times. Or there's just so many other things that can cause a family to fall short and need those gaps in food help throughout the month. And so that's when you become under the label of sort of food insecure. It's just not stable, right? And the pandemic showed us all that we were 2 weeks away from being hungry in our own homes, if 2 paychecks away. And so I think that's really good work. So you left. So you grew up in Greenville,
Yes, ma'am.
correct? And then your family maybe left the Magnolia State for a little while. What encouraged you when you were at the age to do higher education to come on back to your home state? What
Yes, ma'am.
brought you back?
I would just say the feeling of home was one. I will be 100% honest and say that Mississippi College was fourth on my list. And then there
You're
were,
already in, right? They can't kick you out.
That's right. That's right. I hope not. We shall see. And so a part of that was that I had two older brothers that went to Mississippi College. And so it did feel like, oh, well, I'm just following in their footsteps, going in their pathways. But then the three colleges that I had ahead of Mississippi College, it was just it was as if door after door was being closed and closed and closed, and then it was just like the door of MC opened up, and I was like, well, I'm gonna have to take that leap, or go do something else, find another alternative. But I'm pretty sure it was April at this point, so the alternative would have had to come pretty quick. And then I decided on MC, and I couldn't have been happier with the choice.
So how did you connect? Because I know the Delta Scholars is through Mississippi State. So how did that opportunity come with you also being at MC? And mostly for if there's parents or grandparents who have young adults, sort of thinking of what they can snag for their higher ed. How did you combine the two, or which came first?
Yes, ma'am. So I actually just received an email that the school sent out about the opportunity. I think it was the director of the Honors College at Mississippi College sent it out as a correspondence from Mississippi State Delta Scholars, just for anybody who wanted to apply. And I was actually studying abroad. I was in Costa Rica last semester when I got the email.
Oh, shucks. Such a hard time.
Oh, it was so hard to be there. And so I got the email, and honestly, I was just like, well, I have roots within the Delta. I have a passion about this. You go on the website and you see Harvard's seal on there, and Vanderbilt theirs as well. And so I was thinking, well, I'm just at a little Christian college in Mississippi. What stake do I have in this? But I'll put my application in there and just see. And then from there, I got chosen. But it's a public application, so anybody who would like to do it can apply, and I would encourage young people to apply that have a passion for the Delta, and to do it not as a resume builder. So to do it, out of real passion, out of real care for the place that we live in such close proximity to. Like from Jackson, we're a good maybe hour at the most.
2 hour and a half, 2 hours, but worlds away.
Exactly. And so we're at their back door, and so to have care for it, to actually do good instead of, as I said, a resume builder, because these people need help.
So what are you studying at MC?
So I'm a biology major with a minor in African American Studies and Spanish.
What's the big dream?
The big dream right now, it's physical therapy.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm huge on relationships. I love building relationships and connections and just getting to talk to people each and every day. And so the idea of, sitting down with somebody twice a week for 6 weeks and helping them walk again is...
And recognizing they're more than a number, that will go far in whatever career that you choose. How long do you have to, I want to say wrap up your project, but to do your project, to finish it?
Yes, ma'am. So right now... it's a continuation. They would like to see it in continuation.
Gotcha.
So the Delta Scholars, the second part of it is what they call Boston Week, which will be in the beginning of November, when we will actually head to Harvard and we will present what we've done. So some people with research ideas, they'll present their findings, their methods as they've gone on. There are other people who are trying to change policy, so kind of the updates with what they've got there. And then I'll basically be presenting the media that I will have received or taken by then And so once we get there, they give us feedback, and then we're supposed to, carry it out.
Well, Jack, you are welcome back before November to practice your presentation and the media that you got before you make it up there and just knock it out of the park. But I want to keep up with your story. I think it's great. And if anybody wants to contact you on resources that they may have for food insecurity in the Delta, can they get in touch with you?
Yes, ma'am. My email is jtspears, SPEARS, @mc.edu. And that would be the best way to contact me.
All right. I appreciate your time and what you're doing. But you guys stick with us. We got more for you coming up next.